Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for coming out. It's a treat to be able to talk to a community before you actually maybe join that community. And it's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Maybe winter is gone, and so we'll see some spring. So I know taking time today to see the candidates is, I know, meaningful to me. I'm sure it's meaningful to Craig as well. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that. What I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about myself, a little bit about my background and what I might bring to this position, as well as go through a 100-day work plan that we had put together for the commission at our last interview. So, who doesn't start off a public presentation by embarrassing their college students and their spouse, right? So, this is us. These are the most important people in my life, and I love them all dearly, and we are quite a team. So, I have Laurel Sherman. She is a senior at Colorado School of Mines. She has 33 days left before she graduates, walks across the stage, and celebrates a huge milestone in her life. So, we are super proud of our mechanical engineer. Then we have Colin. He is a freshman at the University of Kansas right here in Lawrence. He is at Crable Scholarship Hall and is thriving here. He makes dinners for 48 gentlemen and really has found his niche here in Lawrence and is challenged and excited about his future. And then you have Fred and I. So what's our connection to Lawrence? So Fred, my husband, grew up in Lawrence, so he can tell me all of the street names, all of the neighborhoods, everything that there is to know about Lawrence, and certainly loves Lawrence. He went to Schlegel Elementary School, South Junior High School, and is a proud graduate of Lawrence High School and a very proud Chesty Lion. So we decided to put him up on the stage as well, but has a great deal of depth here. We also have Jerry Sherman, my father-in-law, is here today with us, and he has lived in Lawrence for a very, very long time. Also gave a great career to the United States Air Force, so thank you, Jerry, for that. I came to Lawrence after graduating from Ohio Wesleyan University, a small liberal arts school in Delaware, Ohio, where I studied politics and government. And from there, I did an internship with the city manager in Delaware, Ohio. Her name was Jewel Scott. And she told me that I had to come to the University of Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, if I wanted to be a city manager. So I was like, well, all right, let's check it out. And I packed up my things and ended up in Lawrence, Kansas in 1988, the summer of 1988, right after the Jayhawks had won their national championship for basketball in 1988. But I will say Ohio Wesleyan, although Division III, also won the national championship in basketball that year. So I'm just laying that out there. I'm the good luck charm, right? So I have loved being in Lawrence for that, for my MPA. I then left Lawrence and went to Olathe, Kansas, where I was assistant to the city manager, and have been in Olathe then for 30 years. When I went to Olathe to be the assistant to the city manager, I met this fellow named Fred Sherman, and he was an urban planner in our community development department, and that is how that romance began. Fred left Olathe and went to Georgia Institute of Technology to get his master's degree in urban planning. And upon his return, we made a decision to get married. We got married in Lawrence, Kansas. And that's one of our funny pictures. We used an avant-garde photographer for our wedding, all black and white photos. I think I threw a few color ones in there, but had a great time with that. We got married at just a block south of here on Vermont Street, and we celebrated with family and friends at Liberty Hall. And so it's interesting how Lawrence weaves in and out of our lives throughout those 30 years. I've also spent a great deal of time in Lawrence in the last few weeks, month and a half, driving around, being able to go through neighborhoods, look at areas of Lawrence that I'd never seen before. You have great, strong neighborhoods. You have quality schools. You have a vibrant downtown. You have world-class University of Kansas. You have historic and prestigious Haskell University. These things don't often just happen. You know, you have lots of different layers here in Lawrence, and while it makes it complicated for community discussions on things, it also makes it a very rich and powerful community. And the community spirit that we see here is something that draws me to Lawrence, and that's why I'm interested in Lawrence. Fred and I, in November, came to the Veterans Day Parade. Jerry was in the Veterans Day Parade, didn't want to miss the opportunity to see him in that. And then a few weeks ago, we came to St. Patrick's Day Parade. And it was really a powerful thing to see the Lawrence community come together, tailgating down Massachusetts Street with their families and friends and celebrating everything that there is to celebrate about St. Patrick's Day and spring coming after a long winter. That community spirit is something that is unique and special, and I think probably everyone in this room knows that. And again, that is something that drew me to this position. So let me talk a little bit about my credentials. Who am I as a professional? So I've been with the City of Olathe for 30 years. I have a master's degree in public administration, as I said earlier, and I'm also a credentialed manager with the International City County Management Association. The reason that a credentialed manager is important to me is not because I took an assessment and a test and I got evaluated on how I could do a budget and how the nuts and bolts work, but also because it allows me to dedicate some time and effort to professional development. There is an obligation with a credentialed manager that you continue to learn and grow in your profession, and I've been able to do that, and I'm very proud of my credentialed manager status. When I started with the City of Olathe, I said I started as assistant to the city manager. I had the assignment of working on a solid waste citizen task force. And so young 23-year-old dove right in. Olathe had a landfill at that time. And so if you don't know much about Olathe, it's a full-service city, kind of stood apart from the metro area for a long time. Now is definitely a full-grown suburb of the Kansas City metro area. But we had a landfill, so we were pretty self-sufficient: water, sewer, landfill, all of those things. So landfill, EPA came out in 1990, 89, and said, if you want to keep landfills, they have to have clay liners, they have to do this, they have to do that. And it was really too much for our community at that point to be able to sustain a landfill. So with this citizen task force, I worked with them and came up with policy recommendations to our city council to decide what would we do with our solid waste, what we would do into the future. The recommendation was to do a transfer station, just like I think Lawrence has a transfer station. Also recycling and yard waste, all the things that a modern trash service now provides. But that started 30 years ago, and it really gave me a great launch to my career, working with citizens, working on tough issues, and bringing that to the city council, and 30 years later, still seeing it as best in the business. So very proud of that. In 1994, I became assistant city manager in Olathe, and that's really when my executive experience in city management came to be. I learned how to collaborate. I learned much more about operational issues and guidance and goals and thinking more strategically, and really saw a transformation of our community from 55,000 population to 142,000 population. So that's residential booming, that's commercial booming. That means you have to provide streets, you have to deliver services, you've got to make sure that you've set your community up for the future, and that is not easy. You know, there are definitely stumbles and bumbles that we made along the way, but each of those helped me to learn a little bit more, to ask more questions, to think a little bit differently about things, and how do we innovate. In my career, I have restructured, I have realigned, I've reimagined. So even being in a place 30 years has allowed me to really think differently and make changes. We also combined our municipal services and our utilities, much like Lawrence did recently. And again, I know blending of families like that sometimes takes a little bit longer than you think, but building the right structure for your community will take you far. So I said Olathe is a rapidly growing city, and it has given me great opportunities to learn and grow. The last 10 years, Olathe has just one city manager. So we have a city manager, Michael Wilkes, and Susan Sherman. And so not many cities our size only have two people. We've worked together for 20 years, and while that has been a joy, it has also challenged us to be able to handle anything that comes before us. So before Michael Wilkes came to the City of Olathe, I was acting city manager, so I sat in the spot for a year and dealt with every issue that came up during that time. And again, looking back on that as a 32-year-old, being able to have those experiences really make me the professional that I am today. We do a lot of community engagement in Olathe, and that takes social media, but it's also forums like this. But I will tell you, hands down, you have beat Olathe on probably every meeting I've ever been to. So congratulations on being part of the community and having your voice heard. What we talk about a lot in Olathe is delivering on what the community wants, what the city council, what the commission wants. They set the priorities. It's the job of the city manager and the staff to make sure that we hone our skills and look toward the future to what they want to accomplish, and we work to make that happen every day. And here's a little bit about how we go about doing that in Olathe. So we are values-based. City of Lawrence also has vision, mission, and values. I think it's a really important thing for the organization to have things that they can hang on to and know that those are things that we believe in and we strive for every day. So our vision in Olathe is to set the standard for excellence in public service. That doesn't mean that we have all the resources and staff and money that we'd ever want. And some staff members will say, if we only had 10 more people, we would just be right there. That actually isn't how it works. We will never have the resources that we need. We will never have enough staff. So we challenge our employees to think differently about things, to innovate about things, to try and fail and get up and try again and learn from what maybe didn't work the best and move forward. So our vision, values, and missions are definitely a staple for what we do, how we do it, and has made us a very strong internal organization. We are customer-centric in Olathe. The customer is job one, and I know a lot of governments don't talk about customers. We talk about customers in Olathe as family, friends, and neighbors. Those are people that we are helping in the community. That doesn't mean that we are always saying yes to every single request that we get or that we can fix every problem that there is, but it does mean that when we are dealing with people, we are talking to them in a professional way, we are courteous, we are accurate, and we are also listening to make sure that we understand what the issue is. Which, again, doesn't always mean that they get their way, but it means that we were transparent and professional in the way we handled it, and that has served us very well. And then lastly, data-driven. So we have a lot of data. Every community has a lot of data. And how you put that data together, stack it up, analyze it, look at it, matters. And it can give you a glimpse into the future, and it can give you a glimpse into how you might innovate and be different. But if you aren't using data, then you are missing the boat, I would say. Not every decision has to be data-driven, but I will tell you that most of your creative ideas are hidden in that data somewhere. So mixing the community input, the data, and the talent that you must have in this city to be able to do the things that we want to do. So data-driven and transparency. So if you look on the city's website, you will see dashboards. We love dashboards. And so so we'll have a target and it's green, yellow, or red. And if it's red, it's red. We don't change the data. If it's green, we celebrate it. If it's yellow, we start working on it. If it's red, we really start working on it. Or we decide we're not going to do it anymore. If we're not the best in the business and it's not something that we have to do, those are the questions that we ask. So I also think strategic thinking is really important to communities going forward, and I think this is something I can bring to the table. Strategic thinking and really peering over the mountain and trying to decide what it is that this community wants to be. What does the commission, what is their vision for where we want to be, not just 5 years, 10 years, but maybe 20 years down the road? Where do we want to set a course and have a guiding North Star of where we want to go? Where are those conversations happening? We need to be adaptive and nimble. The answers of the past, technical answers, probably are not going to work for the adaptive challenges that really don't have a specific answer. So I think communities are going to face many more challenges that, well, we could go this way, or we could go that way, or we could go up the middle. And how are we going to talk those through and make sure that we are thinking, 20 years down the line, so that we can answer those questions for a longer period of time, more sustainable questions. Again, being innovative, having partners, collaborating about issues and challenges, that's all part of strategic thinking. And making sure that we're doing the right thing. So in Olathe, in 2000, we did a 20-year strategic plan. And I know, who gets to stay in a community and start a 20-year plan and finish a 20-year plan? And I will tell you, now I'm starting the next 2040 plan. So I have had the privilege to actually be able to see all of that happen in one place. I don't have another friend that can say that. So that has been a real privilege for me. But what it showed me is in 2000, that was our first strategic plan, a little bit hard, a little bit clunky, hard to kind of get our head around what does this mean. But through that, we built performance measures. So we tried to look at business, and we built a scorecard for our community and had different filters about customers and finances and things like that, so we could kind of look at it more theoretically. But what I think we got out of the 20 years is building the base for performance measure, data-driven decisions, and again, looking toward goals and making sure that we're making progress on those goals. Now, for 2040, we're in the midst of doing our 2040 plan. And the 2040 plan feels very different to me because we are really trying to peer way out. And I guess in 2000, I could see myself in 2020. And I think I'll be here in 2040, I'm not saying that. But if you think back to what we didn't have in 2000, did we have cell phones? Did we have all the technology that we have today? And in just 20 short years, we have really transformed some of those things that we thought were true forever. So in 2040, we're talking about driverless cars, we're talking about technology, we're talking about artificial intelligence, and all of those things are really important, and we have to figure those things out. But don't mistake that it is local government's responsibility to also continue to have those community gathering places. So our trails and our parks and our downtowns and our gathering places where people can still meet face to face and talk and interact, those are still going to be really important. But technology is going to be a pull, and it's going to be absolutely necessary to have that data and have those things, because that is what people expect. When any retailer started taking credit cards and the city didn't take credit cards, we heard about it. Our residents said, how come they can do it and you can't do it? Get on the boat, right? And learn how to make this happen. And so I think that demand for services in a new way is going to be the wave of the future, and we have to be ready for it. A couple things on, I guess that's basically the strategic thought, is that we need to continue. I know that Lawrence has a strategic plan, and it is up for renewal, relaunch, the 2-year goals, the 7 critical areas. Those are great progress, and there are performance measures and there are dashboards on your website that tell people where you are on all of those goals, and I think that that's very important. So building partnerships. One of the things that I also bring to the table is building partnerships. It's kind of in my DNA. I like to get together with people and hash things out and talk about it. And I believe that no one person has the right answer for anything. I think we are better together. But that takes a community. That takes community leaders, stakeholders that want to come to the table and want to have those conversations and actually mean having those conversations. I have to give something up. You have to give up something. And we both win in the end. That is what collaboration to me means, and making sure that we are doing that. We have lots of opportunities here, and I'll give one example of what I have done in Olathe that I'm pretty proud of. The Olathe School District is much like Lawrence in terms of Olathe School District encompasses pretty much the city of Olathe. A little bit outside of that, but mostly Olathe. That is a gift. Many people throughout the United States have 3 and 4 school districts that they have to work with in order to make synergies and collaborations. In Olathe, we have 1. And so when my daughter was a 3rd grader, I was talking to her 3rd grade teacher, and she said, oh, this year we learn about local government. And I thought, wow, we could fit into their curriculum. And are we fitting into their curriculum? And how could we do that? Because we want to build citizens for the future, right? Absolutely. Local government should be building citizens for the future. So we developed with the school district a 3rd grade program. Other cities have 3rd grade programs. We are not the only city that does that, and we weren't even the first to do it. But they come to City Hall for a half a day, and they do a mock city council meeting, and they talk about a skateboard park. And the students have to get up and say why they like it or why they don't like it, or act like parents and why they would like it, take on different roles. And it has been really fun to see the lights go on with students with their questions and what they have learned from that experience. We also have a teen council and a youth court. So we make sure that teen council is 3 people from our 5 high schools. We have 5 high schools, and they come together and they do some community projects. They learn about what the city has to offer to them. And if the only thing we get out of that is somebody wants to be a city council member or a city commissioner, or even come to a public forum sometime when they grow up, we have won. And so I think, again, you come into relationships at maybe a lower level, a 3rd grade program, but then when things get heated and something happens with the school district and we need to talk about it and our police department is involved, they know Susan Sherman and they can call me, and I will happily come and help facilitate a meeting and make sure that we are doing what we need to do. I have a passion for local government. If you didn't know that, you certainly should now know that. Clearly, I love my job, and I love making a difference in the community that I serve. This is Olathe, but this is every local government. You know, trash service, police, fire, municipal court. We all have pride in where we live and what we want to do into the future. And so I just want to be very clear, I love local government. I also want to talk just a little bit about being a leader in the profession, because I think it's important. People may not want to choose city management or being on a city commission or being on a city council or putting themselves out there. And it is up to the people who are in the profession to make sure that we give them opportunities to show them what a great profession we have. So I have served on the International City County Management Association Executive Board. It's an elected position. I served for 3 years and got to see the world from a different view and our profession from a different view. Before I did that, I was a co-chair for the leadership task force that happened there, and which raised leadership as a pillar that our city managers and local government professions should rise to. And that is not political leadership. That is leadership that says we owe it to our communities to convene. We owe it to our communities to make sure all the voices are heard. We owe it to our community to make sure that every voice is heard. So I've gotten awards. I've served on the Kansas Association of City Management, and I've worked on the strategic plan for ICMA. So we were asked to talk about a 100-day plan. our approach to coming to a new job in Lawrence, Kansas. And so I'm going to talk through that. I will tell you that it's a plan, and on day one it may go out the window, or on day one we add things to it, or we are nimble and flexible so that whatever we need to do into the next 100 days, we're going to get that done. This is the graphic that I gave to the City Commission that day, and I broke it into 4 parts, and you can see that. So pre-100 days, so I kind of cheated a little. I'm doing some pre-work. I read the book before I went to class. And I'll talk about each of these. So the first 30 days is really about people. Making sure I make contact with people, definitely the commission, the city manager's office, the department heads, the employees, the community stakeholders, the community leaders. You have a lot of boards and committees. All of those people, and probably many of you have served on those. And actually Jerry Sherman served on the airport commission, so I know I have a little inside scoop on the airport. But you have a lot of people that are very interested in what you do here. 30 to 60 days is projects and plans. What can I learn about what's going on already? I know there's a 9th Street corridor. I know 19th and Iowa is getting a tunnel or a way across. Lots of things happening in Lawrence, and I need to get plugged in to see what that landscape looks like. And then 60 to 100 days, performance and processes. So let me go through those a little bit. So learning and understanding, I've already said that that's going to be something that I'm already doing. I'm reading the website. I'm reading the Lawrence Journal World. I'm looking at social media and trying to, again, read, meet, learn, and understand what is going on and what is the landscape here in Lawrence. And that will go up until day one. So day one, so this I think is Muncher's Donuts. So I thought this was a perfect slide to use to say that I'm sure in those first 30 days when it's all about people, I'll be eating a lot of donuts, I'll be drinking a lot of coffee, I'll be out and about and accessible as I can be, so that people get an opportunity to get to know who I am, develop relationships, and build trust. You know, I'm going to first, I think I said this in the paper, I'm going to listen more than I talk. That is actually what my personality is. And I'm going to listen to understand what the issues are. I think one of my talents is to connect things that one person might say, another person might say, and say, well, we do have a theme here, and while you haven't talked to this person, maybe you should. And so trying to make those connections and listening to understand. 31 to 60 days, again, like I said, the priorities, plans, and projects, taking tours, the budget, strategic plan that you've already got underway, where are we on that, how do we move some of those things forward, and I also think doing a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, either with the city commission, definitely with department heads and employees, to kind of see where do we think gaps are and where are ways that we can really celebrate what we've been really great at doing. I know that there's lots of plans out there. I know the downtown master plan has been discussed at least in the last week, you know, at the commission meeting. You have a transportation plan, you have a cultural plan, and I know that the budget and CIP during this time is when you have to build and present the budget and CIP. So that is going to take a lot of the time in that segment. And then lastly, 61 to 100 days, what are we doing in terms of processes? Are there things that hitch us up along the way as a staff that maybe we need to smooth out and talk about if we could do things differently? Can we think about things differently? Can we innovate a process? What's our performance like? Have we asked our residents what they think of the city services here in Olathe? Wow, I did it. Lawrence. So in Olathe, we do a citizen survey, and every year, ETC actually lives in Olathe. It's the company that does our citizen survey, and so they help us along the way, and we've learned a great deal from what they have given us for data and maps and how people think and why people think the ways they do. But I also think asking the right questions is a really important part of this process improvement and performance. So the people that work for the City of Olathe know the answers. have we asked everyone all the way down the line how they might be able to innovate and make their job a little bit easier for them and maybe even cost effective? Or maybe they need a new piece of equipment that costs money, but in the end that makes us more efficient and helps us get our job done better. Those kind of questions are the things that I think we need to delve in that last quadrant. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for coming out and listening to 30 minutes of me, and I look forward to continuing the discussion further into the future.
Thank you, Susan, very much. Appreciate it. So now we're going to have about 30 minutes for questions and answers, and there's going to be a few ground rules. One is that we want to try to be as fair and balanced as we can, and there's a lot of people here, so if people have questions, I'm going to do the Phil Donahue style. Have you raise your hand, and I'll do my best to get to you with the microphone. What I ask is that you be succinct, please. Really ask a direct question so she has time to answer that, because we do have limited time. I'm going to keep this on track. We do have the next candidate coming up as well. So with that, who would like to start things off and ask a question?
Thanks, Porter. Margaret Weiss-Bryan Morris, CEO of the Lawrence Art Center. And I actually wrote my question down to be succinct. Can you talk about the role of arts and culture in a city and what you see as the city government's relationship, what that might be to that role?
Sure, thank you. So the question has to do with arts and their linkage to local government. And I think arts are a very important part of local government. I don't think it is the only funder of arts, but I definitely believe it is a partner and an integral part of that. My experience has been in a community that I will tell you 30 years ago did not want to deal with art. But then we had the civic band come up, and then we had somebody said, well, we should do an exhibit in downtown of some artists, and we dug into it a little bit and said, you know, it doesn't really cost a whole lot of money to do this, you know, to start us off. And now I can tell you that we have lots of money for outdoor sculptures in Olathe, and what that brought to our community was bringing people together. People come and look at that art, and they appreciate the art for whatever it is. It can be oranges, like the slices of oranges that are outside of the library. Lots of talk, and that gets people talking together and making a difference. So absolutely, I think local government has a role in partnering with the arts community and making sure that's a rich part of who your community is.
Right. We'll just go into the first hand I see.
Hello, my name is Ursula Miner, president of the Lawrence Branch NAACP in Lawrence.
Great.
What is your opinion on the importance of data collection and body cams, and do you plan to continue the efforts Lawrence has started making in that direction in regards to fair policing?
So I don't know, a lot of these questions I'm probably going to say I don't know everything I need to know about the Lawrence policy or procedure. I think we are in a time, a divisive time, where you are being videotaped in every place that you go. And so I think having body cameras with our police officers is a good idea. But that comes with the ability to be able to fund that, to be able to store all that video. So I'll go on the operational side of it for a minute, and making sure that you're doing it right. Policies and procedures, and how are you protecting the person that you're videotaping as well as the officer who is wearing that camera. I do believe that is where communities are going. Everyone will have a body camera, and it probably is for, again, both people's protection. This is how this conversation went, and unfortunately, I think that's where we are on the trust issue. But I think the more transparent that we can be, the more we build trust in the police department, in the community, and in the local government.
Hi, Katie Welsh, citizen. We have an issue in Lawrence in terms of equity for low-income kids on the east side and parks and rec facilities on the east side. You've been head of Parks and Rec in Olathe. Can you talk about how you've addressed that? Thank
Sure.
you.
Absolutely. So Parks and Recreation programs, and Olathe, if you don't know, is a very diverse city. So we have 11% Hispanics. We have many of our schools have free and reduced lunches. So I am pretty familiar with those kind of situations. In our Parks and Recreation specifically, again, I think you want full access to be able to have every child that wants to play baseball or t-ball or swim in the pool. We have to come together and figure out how to make that happen for those kids. Again, we do scholarships in Olathe, but we also have a school district that we partner with. We do an after-school program with our school district in a couple of our schools, and the city ended up taking the schools that couldn't get the numbers that made the math work for our other provider. But with a little bit of help, not city dollars, there are no city dollars in that program, but it is that personal touch of I think we can make this work and we can reduce the dollar amount and we can make it happen. Because I think, again, building the youth, every single youth needs to be a part of what the community and the local government does.
Next question.
Yes, what type of relationship do you envision as the city manager with the other governmental entities in Douglas County?
Right, so I think you have to have collegial and professional relationships with city, county, state, and federal government. I think especially if you are in the county seat, like we are here in Lawrence, and so is Olathe, that there are many opportunities to partner and talk about how you are moving programs forward. But it has to be where I can sit down with Sarah Plinsky, I know Sarah, as the interim county manager and have a discussion about whatever the issue is. If it's an agreement that is 50 years old that really hasn't been used, and I'm not that familiar with it, but I know there are issues there. Those are things that we have to sit down and be able to hammer out and make recommendations to our governing bodies about what is best for both entities.
I'm working my way up from the back here.
Ken Easthouse. As you mentioned, Lawrence is a community that is very diverse and very passionate about our various opinions on things, and sometimes that passion conflicts with one another. Can you give me an example of a time in your previous work where groups have had competing interests and how you manage that at your level and how you would do that here in Lawrence?
Okay. Sure. Thanks for the question. So competing interests. So the one that comes to mind is a little bit old, but it's the approach I would take. When we decided many years ago that we wanted to do a no smoking ordinance in Olathe, the city council was very much in favor of doing the ordinance, and as it came up, businesses and others came forward and said, no, this is a privacy matter, this is something that we should talk about, you're going to run our business out if we can't have people come in and be able to sit in a smoking and non-smoking section. And so I was the staff liaison for a 20-member smoking ordinance committee, and it was very, very contentious. There are a lot of strong feelings. At that time, there were a lot of strong feelings about smoking and the ability of business owners to choose their own path, and especially in specific businesses, bars, and things like that, really felt like this was going to ruin them, and that everyone would go to an adjacent city, because we're close enough, you could just hop down 135th Street and make it to another place. And in the end, we were able to compromise. It took us a while. We met and we met and we met and we researched and we tried to come up with a different type of solution. And so we allowed bars to become private. If they wanted to remain smoking in their bar, that they would have to take the extra step to become a private bar, and that had its own things that would come with it, a $10 cover and a membership and things like that. And we also talked about phasing it in so that people could get used to the idea. Now, in the end, you can see us, 15 years later, it hasn't been an issue, in my opinion. I'm sure others might think differently about that. But that was one where it was very contentious for our community, and we came together, hashed it out. Not everyone was happy in the end, but the majority of people understood what our path was going forward and why we're doing it.
As you can see, Lawrence is a very large city with lots of shopping areas. However, the downtown Lawrence is pretty much considered an anchor in the city compared to Olathe, which has a lot of shopping malls and strip malls and a very tiny downtown, if you want to call it a downtown. How would you compare the two, and what would you do here compared to Olathe downtown?
That is a great question. So I've probably spent 20 years trying to revitalize Olathe's downtown. And so Lawrence has done it right in terms of in the 70s and 80s when people wanted to allow the anchors to go out of downtown. People stood tall and people stood strong to make sure that you kept a vibrant downtown. Because I can tell you once you lose that, it is extremely difficult to get it back. And it's not impossible, but it is very, very difficult because once you become a government center as a downtown, then you have people during the day, but at night there is nothing to do and no one comes back down to what you're doing. So in that sense, I applaud Lawrence in standing tall on what they believed in. And again, the city manager job is to make sure that whatever that vision is, we carry it forward. I will tell you there are issues with having many, many different strip malls, especially now while retail is going down. People are looking for a customer experience. You can get that still in downtown Lawrence. You can have a great meal. You can shop, but it's not all shopping. It is an experience just to walk downtown, just like the St. Patrick's Day Parade or the event, you have street performers come during the summer. Those things draw people downtown, and in Olathe, we are inching toward that, but we know that center and that gathering place is so important. The city council in Olathe wanted to do retail, and we did retail, big box retail, and that has served our community very well. But I can tell you that when Amazon starts dropping packages off in people's front doors, we're going to have some new issues to deal with there that maybe Lawrence isn't going to have to deal with as much.
Hi, my name is Rob. I live in West Lawrence. I've heard that Olathe has very effective processes for funding and maintaining roads. Are there any best practices that you could adapt to Lawrence?
So through our Direction Finder citizen survey in Olathe, we know that top priority for our residents was street preservation and being able to move. Public safety is right there too. But we also knew we were not going to get new revenues. We didn't have enough revenues in order to take enough money to do street maintenance and still be able to uphold the service delivery that we have in every other area. So we went to the voters and got a sales tax for street maintenance, and we have an oversight committee that looks at how those dollars are spent, and we line out how many miles of street preservation we're going to do in that year. We also bond now for complete street reconstruction, because as we went out and surveyed all of our streets, we went, well, this one's done. It's absolutely can't be just overlaid. And what we learned through that process is, and I don't want to get too technical, but there's a bell curve to everything, but there's a curve that says after 7 years, if you don't go back to that street and do something to it, whether it's sealing it, making sure the cracks are sealed, putting something on it, then the rate that it will digress will cost you more into the future, and you'll have to rebuild it. And so we don't want to rebuild streets in Olathe anymore. We just want to mill and overlay them, but we got to stay on top of that. And so we had to have a sales tax that helped us do that, and that is how we did it in Olathe.
Susan, take a drink. You have time to breathe.
I should talk longer. I should be more verbose and just keep telling stories.
My name is Phil Friedemann. I've lived in Lawrence 23 years. I'm a retired pastor and teacher, and I judge myself to be an acute observer of human behavior. And what my wife and I have discovered again and again, and it's affecting all the citizens, all the systems in these United States and maybe elsewhere. I'm very, very concerned. And the mantra of our country has become, hurry up and wait and wait and wait and wait again and again and again. What values in your practices do you bring that will cure this, combat it? Because the frustration in real people in Lawrence, Kansas, and probably everywhere else is that we're not getting connected and getting things done. Enough already.
Okay. I can sense your frustration. So sometimes government processes are slow. So I don't want to say that hire me and things are going to get done tomorrow, because I think sometimes government processes are slow. But I think if you have a strategic plan that tells you where we are going and what we are heading for, and maybe there are milestones so that you can feel and see that things are happening, even though this great thing right here isn't happening yet, this 2-year goal happened, and this 4-year goal is on its way to being happening, and maybe it's more transparency about what we are doing and less about that we're not getting anything done. And so I think some of it is communicating, especially on a local government level. I can't speak for federal and state. I probably share some of those frustrations, but on a local level, we should be being able to get out there and we pick up the trash every week, our compost, our recycling. I know that happens here. And so there are things that are getting done. It really is, what are those long-term goals and how can we communicate better that we are making progress on those even though we haven't quite touched the end point. I'm not sure I've answered your question, but that's how I would approach it, trying to communicate what we are doing rather than what we haven't been able to accomplish yet.
Trying to find a female voice.
Thank you. My name is Marilyn Hull. And my question is, given the declining capacity of local media, how would you try to ensure that citizens are well informed on issues before they come to a head, right before our commission vote?
That is a great question. I think every community in America is grappling with how to communicate and get people engaged in a meaningful way. So there is no longer a newspaper that solely looks at Olathe, Kansas. When I started 30 years ago, we had the Daily News, and just like the Lawrence Journal-World, they had opinions and they had great insight, and they could tell you what was going on. And that wasn't always from the city council's perspective, but it certainly gave the public a great way to connect with their community. And now with social media, it's much more difficult. You can find ways to get information, but it is much more difficult, and the information you get might not be accurate. And so we have to work extra hard. I think local governments have got to use social media and Twitter just like everyone else in the world. But we have to be responsive to that, and we have to be out there a lot, and that takes time and effort and intentionality. The other part is making sure that you're transparent. So I know the Lawrence City Commission is streamed on the computer, on TV. People can watch that, but are people watching it? And how can you measure that? And how can you make it more enticing to get people to be engaged and learn about local government in that way? I still believe in the newsletter. We do 6 of those a year in Olathe, and through our citizen survey, we know that that is the most important piece of information for people to get their local government information. So we don't have a newspaper, so we have our newsletter, and that is the top thing where people get their information. So what do? We spend a lot of time on what we're going to put in that newsletter, how it's written, make sure that it has everyone's phone number on there and website information. So again, it is a great challenge that I think every city is facing, but that we have to just continually over-communicate as much as we can.
Hi, my name is Paul DeGeorge. My wife and I own Wonder Fair, which is a business on Mass Street. And I know Olathe has developed very rapidly over the last several decades. And Lawrence is developing slower, but still developing. And I think there's a frustration here to see the incentives for developers going to an already privileged and wealthy class. So I'm curious what your approach would be to economic development to ensure that both the opportunities and the benefits are distributed more equitably.
Great question. So every community has their way of dealing with making sure that you have a balanced tax base. So in Olathe, we felt like 20 years ago, the city council decided that we had 75 residential or less. Our tax base was heavily reliant on residential property tax, and we wanted to improve and diversify our tax base with commercial properties. And so we embarked upon an economic development program with our Chamber of Commerce, like Lawrence does, with some goals to make that a more diversified tax base. That's really it, diversified tax base. In Olathe, 51% of the dollars that we bring into the community or to the city now is sales tax. That is a frightening number when you know that Amazon is going to drop drones and do things like that, where our stores may end up closing, especially big box stores, and those revenues will go away. So we're constantly trying to balance what is the right thing to do. And so our city council has incentivized on the commercial side quite a bit for things. And now, back to a question earlier, if you come to our downtown, we'll immediately talk about a 50% tax abatement to you. But I think our council, because they want that to grow, would go higher. It's just a philosophy, and it's their philosophy and their targets that they are going for. And then the Economic Development Corporation and the city management and our staff follow that lead and try to think differently about how to incent things. But it certainly was that balance. That's where that comes from. And while Olathe is affluent, Johnson County is affluent, our residents want the convenience of being able to go to a big box store. And so we are following their lead on some of those. I think Lawrence is different.
Thank you. John Nalbandian. Susan, you've been involved in the International City County Management Association much more, far greater than most of the managers here in Lawrence or Douglas County. How has that involvement benefited the city of Olathe, either in terms of ideas you've been exposed to or people that you've been exposed to in context? And how might that, you see that same kind of benefit here?
Right, absolutely. It was never my goal to be on the International City County Management Association Executive Board, but when the opportunity presented itself, I thought long and hard about how would my current employer benefit from that, or how might I benefit from that as well. it has been an experience that has exposed me to cities across this nation, and really talking about things that maybe we don't talk about in Olathe as much because where we are. So the next president of ICMA is going to be Jane Brodigan. She is the city manager in Boulder, Colorado. I served with her, and her deputy, Tanya Angie, also was on the board with me. Tanya worked in a different city, Mankato, Minnesota at the time. And we collaborate and we talk about what are the issues that are facing, Boulder, what are the issues that are facing Auburn, Alabama was on there. And so while you talk about big issues of diversity and sustainability and what people are doing, I could bring back those ideas and those thoughts and Olathe-ize them. We talk about that all the time. Not every thing works for every community, but you bring the best ideas and you try to fit them into what works for your community. And I think that has been the gold that Olathe has gotten from that. I have learned a lot about how different governing bodies work, and really the values of the profession, making sure that we're convening, making sure that we're facilitating, making sure that we are leaders in the community, and again, not political leaders, but leaders so that we are making sure that all the voices are at the table and everyone has their opportunity to have their voice heard and considered. Different perspectives make us better. Even on the ICMA board, you had small towns, you had counties, you had bigger towns, you have affluent towns, and you have less affluent towns. And as we talked through issues, their voices pile one on the next, and helped us, especially on the strategic plan that we did. We talked about how to build communities and make them better, and that we only have a small period of time in these communities, even if we're here for 30 years. In the grand scheme of things in those communities, you are a blip on the screen, but we all should be trying to do things that make our communities better. So when I leave whatever community I'm in, they are better for me having been there in whatever capacity, whether it was building partnerships or learning more about how to build businesses in a creative way. All of those things matter. And I think that's what ICMA allowed me to kind of lift up above the day-to-day operations and think more about what communities are and can be into the future, and what my role and all city managers' role are in making them better.
I think we have time for one more question. I want to remind everybody, you have the candidate feedback form. If you didn't get your question answered, you have some sort of comment you want to submit to the City Commission, you can fill this out. We have pens on the back table, and there's a box back there that you can submit this to, and or there is a email address to the consultant, so you can send your questions there so they can be reviewed.
Seamus Hallburn, Lawrence Professional Firefighters. You touched on this earlier, Susan, but the city and the county are beginning to renegotiate an agreement which outlines the financial obligations for EMS. Have you reviewed the current document? Do you have any thoughts for improvements?
So I have not been involved in reviewing any documents, I know that the negotiations are going on. And I can just tell you my approach to that would be to try to understand what is being presented on both sides. It's always a tough thing, right? We all want to work together, and we all need to work together to make the community safe. And we obviously want to, or I would say for myself, I don't know, public safety is very, very important, and we want to be able to pay competitively. We want to be able to make sure that our people are very safe and they have the equipment that they need. That's from Susan Sherman, Assistant City Manager perspective in Olathe. I don't know that that would be different here. Again, I would be happy to be a part of those discussions. I don't know enough about it really to give you an answer on that today.
Great, thank you, Susan, very much.